I'm Corbett Wall with DVAuction, here with your feeder flash for Tuesday, January the 28th, brought to you in part by Kansas Regenerative Medical Center. Kansas RMC is one of the first and largest standalone stem cell treatment centers in the Midwest. These guys are pioneers in the regenerative medical field. And if you guys aren't big about big cities for treatment like I am not, you can get an appointment at one of their locations in Manhattan, Kansas. For more information, go to kansasrmc.com. Also, Beaver County Stockyards in Beaver, Oklahoma. Another big sale this week. They're looking at 7,500 head for their sales here on Tuesday and Wednesday. Big feeder auction today on Tuesday. 6,500 plus. They're looking at 1,100 calves, 4 to 6 weights. 80% of them wean. Just some good calves there, guys, if you guys are interested in them. And then over 5,500 yearlings, pushing 6,000 yearlings. Wow, where are you going to find that, guys? And I mean, they'll be hard as rocks and quality to burn, guys. About 1,800 yearling heifers, most of them weighing 600 to 800 pounds. They will have one load of replacement quality black 800-pound heifers, or thereabouts 800 pounds, and they'll be good enough to keep, guys, if you want to do something like that. They'll sure have 10 to 15 straight loads of yearling heifers. And then looking at about 4,000 head of yearling steers, most of them weighing 700 to 900 pounds. Be a few grazing yearlings in there, some bigger bunches of them, but they'll sure have 30 straight loads of yearling steers, guys. You can check those out at DVAuction.com. Get a hold of them at the sale barn office a little bit early if you want to get approved to bid. That sale is going to start at 7 o'clock in the morning here on Tuesday for the big feeder cattle sale. Then on Wednesday, starting at 8 o'clock, they're going to have over 500 head of cows. Be a lot of older bred cows and weigh-ups, but they are going to have 90 head of running age bred cows from one outfit. Going to have 20 head of second calf heifers coming from another outfit. They'll be in high demand. And then about 30 head of 4 to 6 year olds, including in theirs, 8 of them have already calved. So it'll be 8 pairs in that deal. So it'll be young pairs and bred cows, but good cow sale there on Wednesday. Early charge Fizzles, and I'm talking about your CME cattle futures. Everybody's looking at the cattle futures on the Monday right after a Friday cattle on feed report to see what the result was, and we saw a fairly bullish cattle on feed report on Friday. Of course, everything's been bullish here, especially last week with everything that we saw in the fat cattle arena and the board rising and everything. But man, we saw right off the bat whenever the board opened, cattle futures went straight up. And we saw some big gains there, but they didn't last. As we approached late morning and noontime, they started to fizzle, and we talked about that on our last feeder flash visit, is how we assumed that this week would be a volatile week in your cattle futures. And I think we saw that starting the day out, or the week out on Monday, and I think we'll see that all week long. But by the time the board closed, it was only your spot months, your closest up, that were higher, and most all others were lower, although your live cattle did see some unevenness in your back months there, but feeder cattle was sure lower on the back end, but we'd seen such big gains on them late last week. But, you know, we're starting to see that people are learning that Trump was not kidding. He was not fooling around. He is absolutely doing exactly what he said he was going to do. And those of us that have always been big Trump supporters, we are loving it. But some of the more woke of the communities, they're not sure how to handle it. He is absolutely going out and rounding up the illegal aliens. And just like he said, he's going after the worst first. You know, the killers, the rapists, those that are committing crimes, nuisance to the communities. He's going after them first. You know, there's been some rumors around that, you know, oh, they're going to have a raid on a packing house, or they did have a raid on a packing house, or they're looking at the packing houses. No, he's not going to where people are working, even if they're undocumented. He's not going there. He's going to these gangbanger parties and things like that. Went to one in Colorado and gathered up about 50 head of them, and they were everything from rapists to robbers to murderers to all kinds of things. Confiscated all kinds of guns and money and dope, and he is flat going after them. And I think it's great. You know, when a man does what he said he was going to do, I think, you know, you just have to give it to him. But sometimes the citizens, the society doesn't know how to handle it when he's absolutely doing things just like he said he was going to do. It scares some people a little bit, scares the market a little bit. I heard that late on Monday they were getting shots fired back at them from south of the Mexican border as they were running some illegal immigrants back across the river where they belong, and was getting some shots fired at them. You know, that's not cool. That's not going to help the cattle border, the border for crossing cattle open anytime sooner. You know, we've been talking the last several visits about all the unevenness that's going on with reopening the border for cattle crossings there. But, you know, we saw on the Cattle on Feed report some results of just the border being closed here for about 2 months. And we saw Texas placements in December were down 23% compared to a year ago. Wow. You know, we know most of those cattle stay close to the border that they're moving across. We thought there would be a little bit of movement in there. And actually our cattle imports from Mexico routinely only make up about 3% of all cattle. But you add dairy cattle in there, you take those out and it gets a little bit more. But you know, we're seeing your cattle on feed, or your fed cattle slaughter, is usually made up of about 5% Mexican cattle when the border is wide open, because we usually get about 1 million head of them in here a year, and we shut them off for a couple of months. It starts to make a little bit of difference. We saw, you don't feed a lot of cattle in California, but we saw the placements in California during December down 16%. But placements as a whole were only down 3.3%, but that was our bullish part of the Cattle on Feed report, and we only got to enjoy that for about half a session on your CME cattle futures. But, you know, people went right on, and your board was good, or I mean your cattle auctions were good. Everybody was selling cattle high. We saw some new highs quoted, different areas, different regions. We saw a real-time index rise nearly $2 with the inclusion of Monday sales. So, you know, we're getting very, very close to 280 for our index levels there, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's look at your board to open the week on Monday. February live cattle futures were up 90 cents at 205.67. April was up 80 cents at 203.82. Your back months were mixed, down 47 to up 82. Now, feeder cattle for January were up 102 at 279.72, right in there tight with where your index levels are, and we know that. It always comes together because it's cash settled. March feeder cattle down 132, and I would say when we lose the January contract, and then we're susceptible to all of our contracts going down hard, you know, at the very end of this month and early next month here, which is right around the corner. I mean, like the end of this week, guys. But March ended the session at 275.25. Your back months on feeder cattle were down 42 cents to down 107. March corn was down 4.5 cents a bushel at 482. Beans for March down 10 3/4 at 10.45 a bushel. Hard red winter wheat for March down 6.25 cents a bushel at 553 1/4. Your weighted average was another all-time record high on last week's negotiated fed cattle trade out of your 5-area feeding region. It totaled 67,100, a little bit more than the previous week of 65,300. Not quite as many as the same week a year ago, which was 69,700. But live sales of fat steers and heifers in your 5-area feeding region, extremely heavy to the northern plains and the Midwest. but they ranged from 201 to 212, which was $1 to $6 higher. Your weighted average on live steers in the 5 area, another new record high by a bunch at 209.19. That was up 552. We blew by the weighted average from a week ago by more than $5.50. Wow. Dress trade in your 5 area ranged from 320 to 339. That was $2 to $8 higher. Your weighted average on dress steers in the 5 area was 329.72. So most of the dress trade was at 330. But that weighted average on dress steers was up 774 compared to the previous week's dressed weighted average. As a whole, I harped on that quite a bit on our last visit. Southern Plains are just completely out of the ballpark. They have to pay admission to even get close enough to watch. But Southern Plains trade was steady to a buck higher last week from 201 to 202. Then you get into the Northern Plains. They did have a few cattle trade in northern Kansas late, 208, 210, but for the most part not. Northern Plains traded 6 to 7 bucks higher from 210 to 212, $6 to $10 higher dress from 328 to 330, with a few there from 338 to 339. But mostly in the Northern Plains where they have the leverage, those guys that trade cattle every week, they've got the leverage. If you don't have any leverage, you have no hand in the relationship at all. That means if you were looking at a personal relationship, you would have a wife that had the big job, was the bacon winner, had all the money in her family, had the looks, had the brains, had the house, everything. You got no hand in the relationship when it comes time to bargain. Let's talk about your nationwide negotiated sales. They totaled 82,600 head. Of those, about 24% or 19,600 were for the 2 to 4 week delivery, and that's pretty much typical. So they didn't get any more of those than usual. A week ago's negotiated trade nationwide was 81,000, and the same week a year ago was 83,400. Negotiated grid sales last week totaled 40,500. Note there was a big increase in the number of forward contracts that were written on 88,400 head. So people really liked that price. They thought we were getting awful close to the top, so they wanted to contract those cattle. That will give packers a little bit of numbers out front. Formula sales totaled 265,400 last week. Of the 4 out of 5 areas in the 5 area that we get information from, your negotiated total in Iowa was 31,200. Iowa continues to sell more cattle negotiated cash than they have the last several years, and more than Nebraska. Nebraska had 26,000 negotiated cash last week. Kansas only 8,000, and Texas only 2,000. Box beef cutout values on Monday were up, with choice cuts at 330.08 up 216, and selects up 426 at 320.55. Your slaughter 114,000 to start the week, which is kind of disappointing. That's 1,000 less than a week ago, 9,000 less than the same week a year ago. Talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DVAuction, based on a 7 to 899 pound steer up through your middle 12 states on a 7-day moving average, late on Monday sitting at 279.77, really close to 280. That was up 177. These are all-time records. Latest CME cash feeder cattle index even closer to 280 at 277.93. Big bred cow and bred heifer sale in Dickinson, North Dakota here on Tuesday. I'm going to be going to Beaver County Stockyards on Tuesday. Jeff Slatton, owner-manager there, he and I are good buddies, and he says not to be a stranger, so I'm going to go up there, hang out, help him sell for a little bit. Hope some of you guys can make it. It's supposed to be a pretty nice day in the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles here on Tuesday. Look at some big sales on Monday to start the week. Oklahoma National Stockyards in Oklahoma City had 13,500 head. The feeders were 5 to 10 bucks higher. the calves unevenly steady. And we've consistently seen that late last week and this week. The drum up on the calves has kind of stopped. I mean, they're high enough, everybody figures, and just not wanting to turn many more out right now while we're in the deep dark depths of the winter. As we get closer to March and closer to pulling some of those bigger cattle off wheat, we might buy some more to turn out for graze out wheat. But right now it was the empty feed yard pens that were going after the cattle with feeders, big gains, and calves not so much. Stick out sale in Oklahoma City was from National Livestock Commission. 101 head, 725 pound steers bring 294. How about Joplin Regional Stockyards in Carthage, Missouri? 12,500 head for them, maybe a few more. Feeders, steers and heifers there, from $5 to $10 higher there in Joplin. They were your National Beefwire stick out sale of the day. Check out your best tested weights, which are most of them when you got a big run like that. But here is the market in the lower Midwest, guys. That 1,311 head of 5-weight steer calves in Joplin, they average 549, weighted average price 328.53. 1,952 head of 6-weight steers average 647 at 303 1/4. 2,080 head of 7-weight steers at JRS, they average 761, weighted average price 273.67. And 1,616 head of 8-weight feeder steers, Joplin Regional Stockyards, averaged 844, weighted average price 264.77. Look at some heifers that were well tested. 944 head of 4-weight heifer calves, average 463 at 322.41. 1,571 head of 5-weight heifers, average 549 at $300.42. And 1,680 head of 6-weight heifers in Joplin, average 641 at $274.40. Give you some individual quotes from all around that were impressive. How about West Point, Nebraska, West Point Livestock Auction? 100 head of 813 pound steers bring 285.50. That'll help the index go up. How about Sioux Falls Regional Livestock in Worthing, South Dakota? They sold some heifers awfully good at steer price. 62 heifers weighed 847 at 263.75. How about Aberdeen Livestock Sales in Aberdeen, South Dakota? They sell 78 steers weighed 755 for 310.75, weighing in the heavy sevens, guys. But the most impressive quote that I saw anywhere on Monday in your Macrocin no BS top quote for the day come out of Faith Livestock Auction, Faith, South Dakota, with 75 feeder steers weighed 800 smooth and bring 296.50. And that's your feeder flash for Tuesday.